Hey everyone, and welcome to this video for P80-105, a course on data science. This is the second in a set of two videos that's focusing on interactivity, and today I'm going to be talking about Plotly and dashboards. I'm going to start by giving an introduction using slides. After that, I'm going to do a screencast with some code, skip around to the parts of the video that you find most useful. Everything is available at p80105.com. There are links in the description, and fantastic. Let's get started. Plotly and dashboards, here we go. So we've talked about putting together websites using R Markdown, right? You write an R Markdown document, it renders to HTML, you host it on GitHub, and then everybody can sort of see what it is you're looking at. And even if you don't host on GitHub, you can create an HTML document that you can share, and that takes advantage of tools that are developed for HTML. You can get a nav bar, you can click around, you have floating tables of content, you can show and hide code, you can do a lot of things that take advantage of some amount of user interactivity. And what we're talking about today, especially with Plotly and also with dashboards, are other things that you can use that are sort of developed for the HTML online ecosystem, but that now you can access from R and R Markdown if you'd like to. And so Plotly is one of those things. It's focused for creating interactive graphics, and it's sort of built on top of the D3 JavaScript library. And in just the same way that you don't have to learn HTML to make websites, you can do that through R Markdown. The beauty of Plotly and the Plotly implementation in R is that you can write R code that looks, you have to learn a slightly new syntax, but that then gives you access to a lot of interactive graphics. Plotly is one example of these sort of HTML tools and HTML framework that allows you to access things that you would like to be able to do to create interactive graphics. And that's sort of one of the ones that we're going to look at. We've seen other examples. We saw very briefly a leaflet map that sort of gives you a way to create a map that somebody can sort of click around on and drag and get some information. There are other options like this. We're going to talk about Plotly in particular today. One of the contexts in which Plotly is relevant or helpful is in the context of a dashboard. And dashboards are the kind of thing that you recognize very often when you see them. It's sort of like a display. Usually it's got a couple of figures sort of floating around on it, and it gives you some insight into some data set very often. There are other uses for dashboards, but like that's sort of a big one. And again, dashboards are often sort of built using HTML and using CSS and using other things like this. And so the great thing about all of this is that we're really not going to have to learn HTML. We're not going to have to learn CSS. We're not going to have to learn D3. We're going to use R Markdown and other tools in R to create interactive web-centric tools that you can either email an HTML file to somebody or you can put online. And that's really where we're going today. So Plotly is an R implementation. There is an R package called Plotly, and it implements this general Plotly framework, which tries to provide a user interface to the D3 library so that you don't have to go and learn D3 to create these graphics. You can at least get some of that functionality based on just like a more familiar user interface. And in particular, the Plotly implementation, at least in R, is very similar to ggplot, at least in the sense that it's based on the same idea. You're going to take a data set and you're going to say, I want this variable to be on the x-axis and this variable to be on the y-axis and this variable to control my color and this variable to do this other thing. You're going to define those mappings, and then given those mappings and the data set, you're going to start telling what kind of a plot you want. You say, I need this kind of a plot, and I want this kind of a marker, and I want this kind of a thing. And it's going to sort of feel, at least initially, it's going to look like something that's very different from ggplot, but the idea is that it's actually pretty similar because it's based on the same sort of grammar of graphics, right? And so hopefully, it's the kind of thing you see, and then you say, all right, I can pick this up. Now, I guess I do also want to be clear that interactive graphics are useful in specific cases, meaning in the same way that you don't want to create a plot that's got weird shapes just because you can, you don't want to create an interactive graphic just because you can. There should always be a reason to add interactivity to whatever it is you're working on. There's got to be some point, some goal that you're trying to use. And so I do use interactive plots. I use them much less frequently than I use static plots, but I do use them on occasion. And those occasions are things like I have a big data set and I want to be able to look at several different aspects of that data set simultaneously. I want to be able to zoom in. I want to be able to select regions that I'm interested in and see what might be going on in some place. I want to be able to sort of zoom out or hover on different things and get some additional information. A lot of times sometimes this is for me, but a lot of times this is a product that I am putting together for somebody else. I want somebody else to be able to interact with a data set in a way that conveys some information. And we'll see both what interactivity looks like, and then also from there start to get a sense of why you might use it and when. Similarly, like dashboards are a thing that I use often enough that I think it's an important tool, but it's especially it's the kind of thing that it's important to know that it exists so that you can recognize when it might be a useful thing for you to produce. Again, these are often web-based sorts of products. They're going to contain a variety of information, and it should be something that you can navigate around pretty easily, so that if you show a dashboard to somebody, they say, all right, cool, I get it. This is a plot of this thing, and then I can sort of tinker around over here and see some other information about this data set or some other thing that you want me to understand. It should be, generally speaking, clear, but it's the kind of thing that's helpful when you have more data than you can convey in a single plot, and you think sort of this dashboard interface is going to be helpful. Great. So you probably have seen dashboards. I think this is a Fitbit dashboard, and this is a health dashboard. Sorry, a marketing dashboard. I was way off on that one. Marketing dashboard, and this is some other kind of thing, right? Like you get the idea about what these sorts of dashboards look like. We're going to implement these things using the flexdashboard package. And the idea here is, again, it's sort of like when we were talking about putting together web pages. Flexdashboard says, all right, if you have R Markdown and you want to output to a particular kind of structure, well then great. We're gonna be able to export to something that is an HTML file that's got sort of all of the dashboard layout that we're interested in. And so we're going to be still sort of writing stuff inside of our Markdown, and we do have to get a little bit of additional information about how we need to tell flexdashboard to structure the dashboard that we want to put together, but it's not a huge amount of additional information, and very often you're just sort of copy and pasting code from some example that you've seen. You can host these dashboards online as part of a web page. They're HTML, they're just like anything else. You could email it to somebody if you wanted to, but you can put these online, and that's sort of the big point of it. And with that, I think we're going to jump in and see first how we make Plotly plots, and then we're going to put it all together into a dashboard. Great. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and jump right on into it. So I've got the same repository that I created for my website, and I'm just going to start adding some content to this. And I'm actually going to start out, I'm going to copy and paste this about our Markdown thing, and I'm going to call this, let's just call this Plotly for now. Let me open up the project real quick. I'm going to do a couple of things. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, of course, open up Plotly, and I'm going to change this to some Plotly examples. This is examples of Plotly. These are not great section titles or things like this, but I just sort of want to get something started. And I'm going to go ahead and I think knit this. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is go to site.yml, and this is just sort of a reminder for myself. I'm going to create a new element on my nav bar that has Plotly, and let's say this should link to Plotly HTML. And then just to make sure that everything sort of still works, I'm going to go to build and rebuild the website so that the nav bar gets updated sort of everywhere that I'm interested in. If I open up this, let's see, and I click to Plotly, sure. I've got Plotly examples of Plotly, and I'm raring to go. All right, so everything's so far so good. So let me go ahead and check out what's going on in Plotly. Now, we're going to create, I think, 2 or 3 different Plotly graphics. We're going to run through these relatively quickly, and we're just going to sort of see what Plotly figures look like and why you might go about using them. So let me go ahead and get started with a data set. We're going to look at the NYC Airbnb data, which is included as part of the library, the P8105 datasets library, P8105 datasets. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load a couple of other things while I'm at it. So let's do library tidyverse. We're going to, of course, need that. Maybe I'll take these quotes off for consistency. And then what else are we going to need? Right, we're going to need Plotly, of course. Okay, Plotly. All right, and I think this is everything that we're going to need here. Do we have it? We'll find out. All right, so let me first, I'm going to create a subset of the data that I'm interested in to get started with, just to sort of play around with today. So the If you recall, the NYC data, NYC Airbnb data set includes a variety of things. Let's just go ahead and print it and make sure we know what's going on here. It's got IDs, it's got reviewer scores, it's city, host ID and name, neighborhood, neighborhood group, so Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, neighborhood within those, latitude, longitude, room type, price, variety of other things. And so what I'm going to do, because I sort of want to focus on creating interactive graphics and worry a little bit less about the magnitude of my data set and sort of dealing with all of this stuff, I'm going to create a subset of this. And I'm even going to go ahead and overwrite the NYC Airbnb data set here. And what I'm going to do is take the NYC Airbnb data set, and I'm going to do a couple of sort of data processing steps first, and then I'm going to make my data set smaller. So the first thing that I'm going to do is update the rating variable is going to be review scores location divided by 2. The review scores location is stars times 2, and so this is just going to give me a 5-star, 4.5 star, and so on. So all right, I've got that, and that's just going to kind of make my life a little bit easier. The next thing that I'm going to do is select the columns in the data set that I'm actually going to be interested in here. So I don't need everything, and so I'm going to keep neighborhood group. I always forget the U here. Neighborhood group, neighborhood. I want to keep rating. Let's say we want to keep price. I probably need latitude, and I need longitude, and what else do we have in here? Use per month, neighborhood, host name, latitude. Let's keep room type also, just in case. Room type. The next thing that I'm going to do is define a subset of the data that I'm actually interested in. So I'm going to filter out everything that's not in Manhattan and everything that's sort of too expensive and everything that isn't an entire home or apartment. So let's go ahead and do this. So I want to keep, what do I want to keep? Neighborhood group is Manhattan, and let's say price is less than 500, and actually let's, instead of less than 500 and greater than, I'm going to say price is somewhere in the range of 100 to 500. Okay, what else am I going to do here? I want to keep, let's look at entire homes and apartments. Room type is double equals entire home slash apartment. I think that's how it's coded. And let me just sort of double check that this is doing something that I'm interested in. Problem with filter input 1. It's not doing what I want to. Let me just double check. Is this doing what I want it to? Yes. So I've got that. All right, so let's, does this neighborhood, that's killing me with the U in neighborhood. I really ought to just rename these variables someday, but whatever. All right, so now I've got a reasonable data set here. I've got everything in Manhattan. It's still 10,000 rows and 7 columns. I'm going to drop everything that doesn't have a rating. So let's drop in a rating and see what we have left. Oops. Here, that's still leaving me like 7,000 rows, and I could filter this down even a little bit more. I could take a sample of size 1,000, I could take a sample of size 5,000, something like this. 7,500 is maybe okay. I guess part of the reason that I'm being careful here when I create this data set is, we'll see, we're going to use this data set to create some interactive graphics, and one of the downsides potentially to a Plotly framework or to a dashboard that uses Plotly is that to create that graphic, all the data has to be stored inside of the web page and has to be reloaded every time. So if I created a graphic on the full data set, it would store the full data set. It would have everything available, and that can make the web page sort of really massive in terms of like the number of megs that have to be downloaded or something like this. So when I'm creating this interactive graphic, at least in this context, I'm doing it in a way where I'm really trying to keep my data set relatively small so that the website doesn't like hog a bunch of bandwidth or anything like this. So all right, that's why we're getting this NYC data set, and we've done some filtering to get to this point. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and save here and get started when we have examples of Plotly. This is actually loading data. and let's make some plotly plots, and the first one I'm going to make is a scatter plot. So the plotly interface, like I said, we're gonna try to have something that is similar to a ggplot kind of a framework, and I'll explain what I mean by that as I go. So the main thing that I need to start with is NYC Airbnb dataset, and I'm going to pipe this into plotly, right? So this is some sort of a plotly thing, and maybe I'll open up the help pages just to take a look. This function is now deprecated. Sorry, that's the wrong one then. I need to use plot_ly. This is the main one. So plotly. First argument is going to be the data. We have to tell it things like type. We can tell it names and colors and things like this. There's a lot of stuff in this ... actually, arguments. So you can have X and Y and markers and indicators and things like this. There's a lot of stuff that's going on inside of there. That's essentially where we are going to be defining our aesthetic mappings. We want to take some variable in our data set and map it to X, and we want to take some variable in our data set and map it to Y, and so on. And then we're going to look at things like what kind of a plot we want to make, but we'll get there. So let me take a quick look here. I'm going to say that X is tilde latitude and Y is equal to tilde longitude. And this is one of those ways where it's just, this is how Plotly has decided it wants to specify the aesthetic mappings. So great, this is how you specify the aesthetic mappings, okay? And let me just, if I run this and see what happens, it says no trace specified. It's tried to come up with something reasonable. So it has decided that scatter seems to be about right, and that's probably true. But let's try to make this a little bit more clear. So if we tell it type very specifically that, yeah, we want a scatter plot, and it says no scatter mode specified, setting the mode to markers. Again, that's probably about right, and we could be a little bit more clear about that. Mode equals markers. Is this doing what we want? We're getting there. So these two things, I guess I want to take a step back and be clear about how we're translating stuff from ggplot to stuff for Plotly. We've got a data set, we've piped it in, that's our first argument, and I've defined these two aesthetic mappings, and then I've defined a scatter plot type. It's going to make it something on X and Y, and then it's putting points. It's sort of assuming in this case that you want little actual individual dots. If you wanted a line plot, you could specify this as a line plot, right? That's sort of the kind of thing that you can do. So here in ggplot, you would be saying, I want G on point or G on line. Here I'm sort of defining a scatter plot, and then I'm saying I want this to be actual points, and you could do G on line instead, right? Like that's sort of the mapping from ggplot into Plotly is data, aesthetics, and then types and modes to come up with the geometries. So let me just sort of take another quick look at things here. I'm going to sort of try to structure this. Okay, so what if I wanted to do, say, color is defined according to price, let's say, and let's see if we can do some other stuff. Alpha equals 0.05, or sorry, 0.5, maybe make this a little bit cleaner. All right, let's run all of this again. So that's starting to look like a plot. Everything is sort of going on here. Now, all right, so gosh, I've been sitting here making these making these Plotly plots without ever asking why you might want to do this. And so this is kind of why you might want to do this, is so that you can take your plot and you can click and drag and zoom in and see what's going on in some area. And as you sort of scroll over each of these, you see it's giving me some information. It's actually right now by default telling me the latitude and the longitude. And maybe that's what you want, maybe it's not what you want. You can double click somewhere else and zoom out again. You can click here. You can sort of, I think, I don't see there are other pan. You can click and drag around if you want to. I sort of zoomed a little bit too much. But there are ways here, again, you can interact with this plot in a way that might be useful for you, or that might be useful for your users. And that's really sort of the point of what's going on with a Plotly plot. I don't think you can interact over this way. Show closest data, compare data, right? There's stuff going on. All right, so next thing that I'm going to point out is we can actually get a little bit more information out of this if you're willing to think about what kind of thing you might want to show when somebody hovers on this. So in particular, there's an attribute in Plotly that is the text, whatever text is shown when you sort of hover your cursor over a point. And right now, I don't have a variable that really goes along with this. I guess maybe what I'll do to sort of start out with, let's say text is rating. Let's see what this is, just to get an idea of how this works. Text, sorry, equals tilde rating. So now if I hover over here, it's showing me latitude and longitude, and it's saying, well, that's a 5. And then there's a 5. I wonder if there's anything in here that isn't a 5. Let's sort of, I saw a 4.5 sort of floating around. Yeah, there's a 4.5 over this way. There's some stuff up over here. All right, great. So what we can do a little bit differently, if we wanted to structure that text a little bit differently. So this, yes, the point here is that when you hover, you are showing some variable, and right now that variable is rating. And you might think to yourself, I would really like to show rating and price in a way that is clear to somebody else. And that's not a problem of that's not a problem of Plotly. That's a problem of I don't have that variable in my data set quite yet. So this is a data manipulation problem that I'm going to run through really quickly. So let's take a look here. I'm going to mutate, and I'm going to create a new text label variable, and the text label that I'm going to create is going to concatenate a couple of strings. I'm going to start out and say the price is some number of dollars, and I'm concatenating this with price. And then I want to put together also rating is something with rating. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and run this really quickly, and then I'll talk about something else. Say text label here. Run it. Great. So it's still showing me latitude and longitude, and now it's showing me, I'm like pointing at my computer screen so that you can see what I'm pointing at. It's showing price 200, and then nothing happens, and then rating 5, right? It turns out, if you know a little bit about how computers are going to interpret strings, you can insert a character that says, give me a new line here. /n means new line. So let me run all of this again. Take a look. So here is a $500 5-star Airbnb. Looks like kind of on the edge of Central Park. It's getting a little bit cheaper over this way, 175. You can actually now see, like, all right, it's probably more expensive in this sort of a range. Maybe we could get some other information, but great. I'm not gonna like keep hammering away at this. I'm just trying to point out you can create these informative scatter plots, and then somebody can zoom in, and you can take advantage of the fact that somebody can then hover and get some information about what's going on here, right? Like this one is a $500 one right up here. All right, awesome. Done with that. Let's move on to our next plot. So the next plot that I want to make here is a box plot. And it's going to be the same kind of a structure that we've started out with. So I need to know data set and aesthetic mappings and what kind of a thing I want to create here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to take my NYC Airbnb data set, and I'm going to send this into Plotly. And now I need to start defining my aesthetic mappings. So what I'm going to say here is similar to a box plot. We're sort of talking about something being on the y-axis. And I'm going to make a box plot here just to sort of be clear about where I'm going. I want to make a box plot that shows price according to neighborhood. And so the way I'm going to do this is say on my y-axis, I want to have price. And on my x-axis, I want to have neighborhood. And I don't know if Plotly is going to do anything at this point or not. It says, well, it's given me a bar. It's taken a guess that a bar seems to be appropriate, and that's really not what I want. So I'm going to be more explicit that the type here should be, I think it's box instead of box plot. Let's try. Great. All right, so now I've got y price, x neighborhood, type here is box. Let me define maybe a couple of other things. Let's do color also according to neighborhood just to make this look a little bit better, maybe a little bit better. Let's find out. Color equals neighborhood. You know, I don't love the colors. I can go in, maybe if I take a look here at plots, sorry, that's the wrong one, at helper, it says colors equals null. Let me just sort of run through. Either a color brewer 2 palette name, something this or blues or a vector of colors. I don't know for sure that Color Brewer 2 org has this, but let's just try colors equals Viridis and like people like this color palette. Let's find out what happens. Perfect, great. I can also do, let's sort of clean this up a little bit again before going on. Let's say we want here, what do we want here? I want to take a look at the neighborhood variable being factor reorder. I want to reorder neighborhood in terms of price to put all of this in order. And now let me run this whole thing with the U. It's killing me. It's killing me with the U. All right. So what do I have here is an ordered box plot for, and it's ordered according to median price. Roosevelt Island has some like, it's wide range, but low median if you want to stay on Roosevelt Island. All right. So we've got in each of these box plots, you can see what's going on in the upper, the quartiles, the fences, the stuff like this. And so you can actually see really clearly what's going on. You're not getting everything on the x-axis in terms of plot labels, but you get some interactivity there. If you wanted to get rid here of Roosevelt Island, you can click on that one and it's going to hide, right? It's going to go away. So let's get rid of Roosevelt Island and Marble Hill. And let's just say like we wanted to actually really just focus in on Inwood. So I'm going to double click on Inwood and it gives me this, this plot, or double click on Chinatown and we see exactly what's going on in Chinatown. You can sort of scroll through and see individual data points and some other stuff. I think you can scroll and just sort of focus in on the middle ones, right? There's some interactivity and neat. We've got a box plot, okay? I don't recall this. I really don't if Plotly has violin plots or not. Yeah, look at that, it does. I don't know how I feel about that. All right, so let's go ahead and make another plot. What we're going to do next here is a bar plot. So let's make a bar plot. And what am I going to show here? So I want to do NYC Airbnb, and I'm going to pass this into Plotly, but Plotly's interface for bar plots is maybe a little bit different. Let me sort of take a quick look here. Let's say, again, I want X to be neighborhood, and I want Y to be, what do I want Y to be? I want Y to be like the number in each group, and I don't have that yet. So what I'm going to do first, actually, is just count up observations in each neighborhood. Okay, let me take a look. So here I've got Battery Park City has 21 observations, Chelsea has 571, Civic Center has 14, Flatiron 46. All right, so I'm getting closer to what I actually care about here. So I'm going to do neighborhood on the x-axis and the number of observations on the y-axis. And I'm going to add in, I almost did plus, as if I was doing ggplot. I need to tell it what type I'm interested in. I want to make a bar plot. Okay, so here we go. I've got in here, I've got Battery Park City, I've got Marble Hill, there's Roosevelt Island. And I can do the same kinds of things here if I wanted to. I could mutate, say mutate. Neighborhood is factor reorder. Neighborhood in terms of in now is the variable that I'm interested in. And let's say, color is also according to neighborhood. I mean, that's also kind of ugly. So let's do colors equals Viridis again. Let me clean up my code just a tiny little bit. All right, I like that better. Cool. All right, so if you wanted to show like how many observations are in each of these, you can now do it. You can see Hell's Kitchen got all 623. What's the most popular? East Village, 848. And there are just a few in places like Inwood, 2 Bridges, Marble Hill. Marble Hill has 2. There you go. All right, so cool. We made some plots. The thing that I want to sort of point out, let's see, plotlyr.com. Like this is this is a useful thing to look at, if only because it gives you some idea about what kinds of things you might be able to do. So you can actually see here bars and histograms, and you can get a little bit more information about what these are showing. This is, for whatever reason, static versions of these, but you get an idea about what bar plots might look like, what box plots might look like, 3D charts. They got 3D charts. Do they have this? It's not embedded here, but you can make 3D charts where you spin things around. You can do 3D paths, 3D lines, and so on. So check out surfaces. I like that. A 3D surface of volcano height. It's just showing you the volcano. I love it. All right, so the point here is not to know every single Plotly object and to figure out how it all works or to do anything like this. It's just to sort of be aware of what kinds of plots are possible, what kinds of things are available. And that's sort of all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to go ahead and knit this, and I'll just sort of show. So that, again, sort of the neat thing here, I haven't uploaded it to the internet yet. This is all still on my machine. But these interactive graphics are not just sitting inside of RStudio. They're actually here on the internet eventually. They're in this HTML document so that if you sent this to somebody else, all of that interactivity that we were looking at actually exists here, that you can share this with somebody else if they want to take a look at what's going on inside of this data set. It's all sort of like shareable and postable and things like this. And so that I think is pretty neat. All right, so that's what we're going to say about that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about, oh, I guess I should mention one thing. So, one quick thing is ggplotly, which, to tell you the truth, I don't love, but I feel like it's a helpful thing to have around. So I'm going to create a similar plot in the tools that we've used in the past. Let's do NYC Airbnb. What did I do when I made this? All right, I'm going to say ggplot, x is latitude, y is longitude, color is price, and let's do geom point. All right, so here I didn't get the color palette. I didn't run my usual code to get the color palette right, but great, there it is. Now I'm going to save this as ggplot scatter. Okay, and here's the trick that you can use is ggplotly on whatever plot I have just saved. Let me run all of this. Create something that looks like ggplot, but that is also interactive, that you can zoom in and do this other stuff. So why am I telling you this? I think the look of this is slightly uglier than what you get if you just use if you just use Plotly. But you can get to something that is interactive using almost exclusively ggplot tools, and sometimes that's a helpful thing to have. Again, I sort of feel like I use ggplotly if I have made a plot for myself and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on with this data point, and instead of trying to filter based on latitude being greater than this or longitude being greater than this, if I just wanted to be able to click on this and see something about it, that's when I might use ggplotly. Most of the time though, if I'm creating a graphic for somebody else, I'm just going to go ahead and use the Plotly interface. I'll take whatever 10-15 minutes it takes to get something like that working. All right, cool. So what we're going to do next is create a dashboard. And the way I'm going to create a dashboard is I'm not going to copy any templates. I'm not going to do anything like this. I am going to do the following. I'm going to go to, where are we here? Our Markdown. I was right on it. And I'm going to get from template, and depending on what else you have installed, there will be a bunch of sort of templates here. And if you scroll through far enough, you get a template flex dashboard. All right. And I'm going to save this as a dashboard. And I'm actually going to do something that is not my favorite thing to do in the world, and I'll explain why in just a minute. I'm going to take this dashboard out of this folder and just put it on my desktop for a minute, okay? And like I say, it sort of kills me to do that. Did it even work? No, here's dashboard. I'm gonna put it on my desktop right next to this. And like I say, it sort of kills me to do this, but I'll explain why in just a minute. So here, let's create this as dashboard, and I'm gonna knit. And it looks sort of weird in this structure, But let me go ahead and like open this up. All right, so what we're looking at here is it's a website, it's HTML, it's got all of this, and it's got here's big spot for chart A and a smaller spot for chart B and a smaller spot for chart C. So let's go back over to the dashboard and figure out what's going on. The orientation here is columns. It's putting the first chart here and then the second chart's in a column here rather than sort of being organized in rows this way. It's filling this up. These are things that I don't usually ever change. I think there's a source embed option that I often like to put. Let me just sort of double check here. So the source embed gives you a little toggle button up here to show the actual source code that underlies this graphic, and I think that's sort of a nice thing to have. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So how is this structure working? Well, I'm telling it in the flex dashboard parlance in the organization. I've got a column with width 650 and then a next column with width 350. It's width 1,000 total. Everything is going to sort of scale to that in this dashboard. And I'm telling first column is this wide, second column is this wide. My first column has one section. It's got a chart, and then I've got some R code here. And then I've got a second column with a first chart and then a second chart. So these sections are creating new little charts, new little elements of my dashboard. And I've got little gaps for R code here and here. So everything so far is kind of working the way that I want it to, okay? And conveniently, super conveniently, who knows how this happened? I actually have 3 charts, and we have made 3 plotly charts. So let's try to do the things that we're interested in. Let's try to recreate those same plots in this dashboard format. So I'm going to copy over the packages that I need here, tidyverse, datasets, and plotly. And then I'm just gonna, what do I need? I need the data that does the data, or sorry, the code chunk that does the data organization. I'm going to put that in here. Again, I'm just copy and pasting from the plotly R markdown. Don't worry about it. Let me go ahead and knit and make sure I haven't broken anything. No. Still looks great. Source code is showing. Packages, data organization. Okay. Let me get my first figure. This is the scatter plot. I'm going to put that into this chart, and let me knit again just to make sure things are working. And no, it's not working. All right. So I'm gonna come back to this in just a second. I'm sort of surprised it's not working though. All right, so like I say, I'll come back to that in just a second. I'm gonna go ahead and copy over the box plot and put it into the second chart. And then I'm gonna take, going the wrong place, my bar chart, and I'm gonna put it into the third chart. Now, I said I'm surprised that this isn't working, and that's like partly true. I'm kind of surprised that this specific thing isn't working right now. But the truth is, I was sort of getting ready to record this video, and I was like, look, all this code that I used last year, it's for sure going to work again. And I went through and I tried to recreate this dashboard, and I got this error. Error invalidate CSS unit size info width anonymous needs screenshot to HTML. I had no idea what's going on. And I'm going to sort of pause for like 2 minutes to explain to you what happened and what I did to try to figure it out, right? Because again, I think that's sort of a useful thing to have. And I want to be clear, this took me like an hour to figure out like what might have happened. And then even then, I don't know that I fully understand it. But I started out, I Googled validate CSS unit plotly dashboard, and that didn't really get me anywhere. And I went to the Flex dashboard web page. Let's sort of look up Flex dashboards. I went to here, the Flex dashboard site, and they've got some examples here. And I was like, oh, Plotly, maybe I'll just download this one and see if it works. And it didn't work. So I figured it's probably not me. There's something going on here. And after a while, I was like Googling. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I finally ended up on the Flex dashboard GitHub page looking at the issues. And I just did a search to see if any of them have to do with Plotly. And this one with 7 comments says, yeah, it does. And it says, gauges don't work. There's an error here. And like reading through, I was rapidly losing any idea of what was going on. But then you sort of get down here and they say, all right, well, this is the same bug as something else. And they say, maybe you should do something like this. So you can sort of click around and see, is this relevant or is this relevant? And then I got over to this one and I started scrolling through. And it turns out after a while, let's see, where does it end up? This will be fixed at some point. Strange did some more. This is now fixed in HTML widget. You can install the last version already on CRAN to make this work again. So, all right, let me just sort of talk through exactly what happens here. So, Flex Dashboard is using Plotly, Plotly is embedded in a Flex Dashboard. Flex Dashboard is using a package HTML widgets. HTML widgets had some change sometime recently that broke the interaction between Plotly and dashboards. And it's a separate package. It's not Plotly, it's not Flex Dashboards, it's HTML widgets sort of sitting off to the side. And if you install Flex Dashboard and you install Plotly, it doesn't necessarily update the HTML widgets business. So all of this to say, after like an long hour, very frustrating trying to figure out exactly what's going on, it turns out, I think this fixes it. Let's just install packages, HTML widgets, which I already have. I've installed it, but I am installing the newest version from CRAN, and it's restarting. Let me save here, and now I'm going to try to knit again, and it works. So, all right, so what's the point of that little digression? The point of that digression is everybody gets stumped by R sometimes. Sometimes, I mean, the truth is sometimes working with these new tools gets frustrating because they are kind of complicated on the back end and it's not coming in a super well packaged structure. Hopefully, and very often, the people who actually develop these tools are committed to getting it right, but it can be confusing. And that's, you know, I mean, that's just sort of, it goes with the territory of working with R. I think it probably goes with the territory of working with almost anything. But you know, in case it makes you feel better, I got stumped by this for a while. And if you're running into the same error that I saw, if you're trying this and you see, what was it? Maybe it's not even in here. No, I've gotten rid of it now. If you see this error like CSS or whatever, something, try reinstalling HTML widgets and you'll get something. Okay, so now going back to the dashboard, let's take a look at what I've created. Here it is. This is what we're seeing. I've got my first chart is that first Plotly thing that I was interested in. I've got this box plots on price. I've got the number of observations in each neighborhood. I can sort of zoom in over here, and that's great. The elements in this Flex dashboard don't have to be interactive. They can be interactive. Some of them can be interactive, some of them not. They don't have to be figures. They can be tables, they can be data sets, they can be subsets, they can be something like this. You can have multiple tabs, you can do all kinds of stuff, right? The idea here is to see like, oh look, check it out, you can do some interesting stuff in this dashboard. All right, so far, mostly so good with like one hiccup along the way. Now, the next thing that I'm gonna point out is here, if I take my dashboard off my desktop and I put it back into the project. So why did I sort of pause about this for a minute? Okay, so let me reopen my dashboard and I'm going to knit this again. And it doesn't look at all like a dashboard. So one of the things that can be frustrating if you are creating a dashboard and you want that dashboard to be part of your website, well, the dashboard YAML sometimes gets mixed up with the site YAML. So I actually have the nav bar and the structure that's coming from the rest of the site rather than from the Flex dashboard stuff. So we've got a couple of options here. I can rebuild the entire website, and for whatever reason, rebuilding the entire website is going to give me something that works the way that it's supposed to. So here, if I just sort of go to this and open up dashboard HTML, then I get the actual dashboard. That's option one. The other option, if you don't want to rebuild your website every single time, is to use a direct command on the command line. And this is listed on the course website also. But if I go into the R Markdown package and I use render, I am rendering dashboard, and I want the output format to be from the Flex dashboard package, a Flex dashboard. So this, again, is going to sort of work output created. I don't know what the arrange warning message is about. I'm not super worried now. It's still going to work the way that it's supposed to. So if you're creating a dashboard in something that isn't a website, you can click knit, everything's going to be fine. If you're creating a dashboard inside of a website, you have to be a little bit more careful in terms of updating what that dashboard looks like to make sure it actually renders to a dashboard. All right. So let me just sort of finish up my website here before giving a couple of closing thoughts. So I want to make sure that somebody who goes to my website can find this. So I'm going to put dashboard here and dashboard.html, dashboard.html. And now I am going to rebuild my website so that the nav bar sort of works everywhere. Great. What else do I need to do? I need to make sure that I have committed everything. Got a lot of stuff going on in here. A lot of this is Plotly widgets, HTML widgets. Crosstalk is showing up in here. Plotly, more, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to assume that this is stuff that I need. And I am going to commit. So this is Plotly and dashboard. Probably should have done a commit in the middle. Let's close. And again, in general, you can just push directly. Since I am making a website under something that isn't my usual account, I have to do a slightly different thing. Let's see. I'm going to get push here. And when I give it enough time to upload, now my dashboard should be available over on the internet. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. I guess the point that I want to make here is, again, just like with Plotly, there is a Flex dashboard for R that you can find if you it should show up pretty quickly if you Google Flex dashboard. There is a long list of things that you can do. So you can get charts oriented this way, charts oriented here. You can get tabs, a couple of panels if you want to. There are a variety of ways that you can organize things. What can you put in here? Value boxes seem like a reasonable thing that you might want to put in. You have gauges. I don't know why gauges. Maybe you can have gauges though. Neat. You know, it's like a speedometer. Awesome. There are a variety of things that you can do. Again, I'm not going to go through everything, but I think one of the things that's helpful to take a look at are things like examples. How have other people used these kinds of dashboards and in what context do they come up? And then all of these that we're looking at here include source code that goes along with them. So picking this one by example, it's got some information up here. It's got some button. It's got some stuff, right? We've created a map here. I don't know what this map is supposed to be showing. The birthplace of R. That's what we're seeing. Where is the birthplace of R? There you go. The birthplace of R is in Auckland. But there's source code over here. So if you wanted to see how this actually ended up working, all the code is here and you can sort of scroll through and see, all right, well, it's doing some Plotly stuff over here and it's got digraphs, it's got some other things, it's got metrics graphs. All right, great. Oh, you can scroll through and see a bunch of stuff. So excellent. Again, play around, see some examples. If you see something that you think is useful, look at the code and try to implement it. And let's just double check, hopefully, that this all worked. Yeah, so here's actually my website. I went to bstp8105.github.io. I've got about, and if I go to about, it's got information. And if I go to the Plotly tab, it takes a minute to load because, again, remember, it's got to access that data set to create each of these figures. But it's got now the three different data sets and the plots that go along with those. And when I check on the dashboard, I've got a dashboard that everybody can take a look at. So that's all I have to say about that. Plotly dashboards, good for interactivity, and you should use interactivity in the settings where you think it's actually going to do you some good. So thanks very much.